Buckle up, because this is the story of how a self-proclaimed restaurant trainer tried to ruin a gentle soul's life, only to completely destroy her own career in the span of a single evening. This happened back in 2015, during the before time when I was working my way through nursing school. I was a waitress at a very specific high-end restaurant. Now this place was unique. They did absolutely zero advertising. No commercials, no flyers, no social media campaigns. They prided themselves entirely on word-of-mouth popularity. If you ate there, it was because someone told you it was the best food in town. Because of this, reputation meant everything to the owners and the management. I had been there for several months and had proven myself to be reliable, efficient, and deeply knowledgeable about the menu. Because of that, the management started trusting me to help train the new staff. I wasn't technically an official trainer, but I was the person they relied on to support new workers once the official trainer set them loose on the floor. Enter Michael. That is not his real name, but it is what we will call him. Michael was an older guy, probably in his late 50s, which made him at least twice my age at the time. He had just been released to work his own shifts. He was a little awkward, a little shy, and absolutely terrified of making a mistake. He was exactly the kind of sweet, hard-working person you want to succeed. He was just great to work with, always polite, always trying his absolute best. On the night of our tale, Michael was assigned to the section right next to mine. This was perfect because it made it incredibly easy for me to keep an eye on him. I could hop in and prop him up the second he hit the weeds. And let me tell you, this was his very first night with his own complete, independent section. In the restaurant business, a new server's first solo night means weeds are absolutely going to abound. I was ready to be his safety net. What Michael was not ready for, however, was his very first demanding round table. About an hour into the dinner rush, a group of 6 people walked in. They were all in their early 20s and they walked in with massive visible attitudes. They looked like the type of people who walked into places just looking for a reason to complain. Michael took the table and within 5 minutes, I saw him walking toward me in the back galley. His face was completely pale. He looked deeply worried and totally confused. He looked at me and said, "They want this specific item, but I don't think that's on our menu, right? The girl at the head of the table says we have the ingredients and that we just need to make it for her. She keeps saying that the other restaurant location makes it for her all the time." Now, under normal circumstances, I could have taught Michael to stand his ground. I could have told him to go back out there and firmly tell them that if it is not on the menu, we cannot make it. But this was his very first night with his own section. Nerves were sky high. His confidence was already fragile, and I knew that forcing a confrontation right now would just cause him to completely spiral. So, I told him to go ask the backline cooks to see if they were willing to do a favor. If the kitchen said no, I promised him I would go out and talk to the table myself. As it turned out, the cooks were feeling generous. It was basically just a specialized wrap if I remember correctly, so it wasn't a massive logistical nightmare. The kitchen agreed to make it. No problem, right? At least not from our end. But that was our first mistake. Giving in to that initial request was apparently the cue for the leader of the table to start a game. This girl, the clear ringleader of the group, decided that she was going to demand something new every single time Michael walked up to the table. It became a twisted game of fetching. As soon as Michael brought out the last requested item, she would look at it, look at him, and suddenly realize she needed something else. A specific sauce. Extra napkins. A different drink. More ice. It was constant. I had been keeping a close eye on him from my section, and I could see the toll it was taking. Seeing his panicked face across the dining room, I gave him a reassuring nod. I started checking in on his other tables, quietly slotting them into my own table cycles so he didn't have to worry about them. This is exactly why the managers paired me next to him. This nightmare carried on for their entire meal. They were incredibly needy, fiercely demanding his full attention, and they offered zero apology, zero manners, and absolutely no kindness. Michael was running himself ragged, sweating, and visibly shaking. I made sure to catch him in the back kitchen to prepare him for the very real possibility of getting absolutely no tip from them. I wanted to calm his panic before it turned into tears, and I reminded him that I was handling his other tables and would not be touching a single dime of the tips from those sections. Honestly, this poor man looked like he was about to quit on the spot. He looked broken. This leader girl was shockingly rude, unbelievably impatient, and gave him absolutely no space to breathe. I was basically functioning as his emotional support animal at this point. And knowing that he was an older man, dealing with this level of disrespect from people young enough to be his children, made it feel a million times worse. To make matters worse, the table had come in close to the end of the night. Because they dragged their meal out so long, they ended up staying past our section's normal closing time. Soon enough, they were the absolute last table left on our side of the restaurant. Usually, the perk of closing with a new waiter is getting cut early, but these people were holding us hostage. That was when Michael walked back into the kitchen, holding a booklet of receipts. He looked completely bewildered. He looked at me and asked how to apply an employee discount to a check. Then he asked if it was okay that they wanted to use more than one employee discount on a single ticket. I stopped wiping down my prep table. I was incredibly confused. An employee discount? On a customer's check? I asked him what he meant. And that is when Michael finally shared the sickening truth of what had been happening out there. He explained that this girl had spent the entire meal berating him, mocking him and making fun of him to her friends. And the reason she claimed she could do this? Because she whispered to him that she was a trainer at our other location across town. She told this poor, sweating, nervous man that he was the absolute worst waiter she had ever seen in her entire life. Suddenly everything clicked. No wonder she knew about the unlisted ingredients. No wonder she claimed the other location made her special meals. And it was zero surprise that Michael was such an absolute nervous wreck. She had spent the last hour psychologically tearing down a new hire at her own company for sport. But the entitlement did not stop there. On top of demanding stacked employee discounts, she was now claiming that there were multiple birthdays in their group. She told Michael she wanted free birthday cakes for everyone at the table, and she demanded that the staff come out and sing the restaurant's birthday song immediately. To say I was livid in that moment is like saying lava is just a little bit warm. I was completely boiling over. I was ready to physically walk out there and throw hands for this poor man. I could not believe the sheer malice of this girl. But then a cold, calculated feeling washed over me. I realized that getting mad wouldn't fix this. Getting smart would. I looked at Michael and told him to go prep the birthday cakes in the back, but under no circumstances was he to go out to the table yet. I told him I would go handle the boss regarding the employee discount. Technically, we could do discounts ourselves on the terminal, but this was such a special, egregious case that it needed management oversight. I also told him I would go gather the rest of the workers for the birthday song. The managers at this restaurant were absolutely amazing. We loved every single one of them because they consistently had our backs. That is incredibly rare in the restaurant industry. So having management that actually cared about the staff was the best part of the job. I walked straight into the front-end boss's office and gave him a quick, detailed rundown of the table's antics. Remember how I mentioned that this was a word-of-mouth restaurant that relied entirely on reputation? Yeah. My boss was absolutely not having a company employee acting so cruelly to staff, even if she wasn't technically his employee. When I finished telling him what she had done to Michael, a dark look crossed my boss's face. I smiled and asked for permission to handle the birthday song my way. He looked up, a slow grin spreading across his face, and gave me full permission. As he did, he grabbed the employee ID numbers that the girl had written down to get the stacked discounts. That trainer would have known perfectly well that employee discounts can absolutely not be stacked on a single check. My boss looked at the numbers, looked at me, and told me he had a very important boss-to-boss phone call to make. I ran out of the office and sprinted to every single employee I could find. Half the restaurant was closing down, which meant we had a ton of people just standing around finishing their side work. I grabbed everyone. Servers, food runners, bussers, and yes, I even recruited the dishwasher from the pit. I gave them each the fastest, most chaotic explanation of what this table had done to Michael, and I laid out the plan. Everyone was instantly on board. The rage on behalf of Michael was unanimous. I walked back to the kitchen and told a trembling Michael that we were ready to drop the cakes. The crowd that marched out to that 6-person tabletop was honestly the largest gathering of employees we had ever had for a birthday song. I am pretty confident it is the largest crowd that restaurant will ever see. We marched out in a massive single-file line. We served free slices of cake in front of every single seat at the table. The leader of the group had the most self-satisfied, smug smirk on her face as she saw the army of staff members surrounding them. She genuinely thought she had one. She thought she had successfully bullied the staff into giving her group a massive royal treatment. We all stood in a massive circle around their corner table, grinning ecstatically, and lined up to sing. And oh boy did we sing. We all sang that birthday song as loud as humanly possible. I need you to remember that they were the absolute last table in that section. And for your visual imagination, this table was tucked deep into a tight corner of the dining room. So while 20 restaurant employees were completely screaming the birthday song at the top of their lungs, the sound waves were bouncing directly off those hard corner walls and reflecting right back into their faces. It was an excruciatingly, deliberately long song. Their smug smiles dropped instantly. Within 3 seconds, their hands flew to their ears, their bodies jumping from the sheer audio onslaught. It was a literal wall of screaming sound. I know for a fact it hurt my own ears just standing there. And the memory of that sheer acoustic pain is something that still makes me smile to this day. We all stood there, a giant unified group, happily screaming our restaurant's special happy birthday song directly into their faces. It still warms my heart a whole decade later. But the story doesn't end with a loud song. While we were gathering, planning, and successfully destroying their eardrums, our front-end boss was busy making phone calls in the back office. He didn't just sit there. He called the manager of the other restaurant location immediately and informed them exactly how their star trainer was representing the brand. And no, she didn't get her stacked employee discounts. In fact, she didn't get her discount at all. I know this for a fact because I was standing right there at the host desk when my front-end manager walked out holding the cordless phone. He looked at the leader of the table, handed her the phone, and said someone wanted to speak with her. I watched the color completely drain from her face as she realized who was on the line. Within seconds, she started to cry. She was sobbing right there at the host stand. She was desperately trying to stammer out excuses for her behavior, pleading into the phone about why she shouldn't be fired. But it was already way too late. It turned out my boss hadn't just called her direct manager. He had called the general manager of the entire company, the person just one step below the owner. Because we were a small company with very few locations, a report like this went straight to the top. Her employee number had been verified. Her behavior had been thoroughly documented by an entire floor of witnesses, and she was done. Terminated on the spot. Effective immediately. When I posted this story online, it blew up, and the community had some amazing insights into the situation. One user commented that they couldn't understand the mind of someone who works in food service and decides to treat another service worker like garbage. They said that normally restaurant workers have a shared trauma bond, so seeing a trainer act like a corporate tyrant to a new hire is just a completely different level of evil. Another person pointed out a very satisfying detail. They commented that she didn't just lose her job that night. She lost her entire network. In a small company that relies entirely on word of mouth, getting fired for maliciously bullying a coworker means your name is completely dirt in that city. She likely had to leave the entire industry or find a job in a completely different town, because news travels fast among restaurant owners. A third comment really made me laugh. They wrote that there is absolutely nothing louder on this earth than a group of petty restaurant workers who have found a righteous cause. They said they could practically hear the echo of that birthday song through the screen, and they hoped the ringing in that girl's ears reminded her to be humble for the rest of her life. And finally, someone made a great point about Michael. They said that while the revenge on the bully was amazing, the real victory was protecting a vulnerable coworker. They commented that older individuals entering the service industry already feel immense pressure and self-doubt, and having a team that literally stands up and screams for you can be the exact thing that keeps you from giving up on yourself. I'm not psychic, so I suppose it is technically possible she could have gone back to her home location later and tried to convince someone to hire her back or begged for a second chance. Anything is possible in this world. But knowing how small that company was, how deeply she traumatized that poor guy, and how clearly I told the tale to my boss, I highly doubt it. I knew the quiet rage my boss possessed, a rare anger he almost never touched unless it was absolutely justified. To this day, I would have almost given up joining in that screaming birthday song, just to be a fly on the wall for those phone calls in the office. Almost. Michael ended up staying with us, by the way. He realized that day that he wasn't alone, and that the team had his back no matter what. He grew into a fantastic, confident waiter who customers absolutely loved. As for the bully, I never saw her face in any of our locations ever again. What would you have done if you were in my situation? Would you have jumped in to save a struggling coworker? Or would you have let them handle the table on their own? Let me know in the comments.